Everyone has a bright light inside of them that deserves to be seen by the world. That's why it's time to shine the light on the extraordinary who are accomplishing phenomenal things. This is the Shine Out Loud Show with Lillian Ogbo.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you are. This is a Shine Out Loud show with me, Lillian Bogo. Now, this episode, I bring you a man who is phenomenal in himself. He has survived over 200 fractures in one go. I have never fractured a pinky finger, and I'm sure I will cry for days if I did. He has survived 200 fractures. He has a condition that only a limited people know about. It's a rare bone disorder known as Osteogenesis Imperfecta. OI. Now, the only time this has ever been heard about or featured was in the movies. And I'm talking about, if any of you have ever seen the movie Breakable, you will know what I'm talking about. He is basically the Samuel L. Jackson character in this movie. I am talking about none other than the culture, diversity, and inclusion specialist, Winston Ben Clements. Winston, welcome to the show.
Wow, thank you so much for having me. Never been compared to Samuel L. Jackson before, so thank you.
You are absolutely welcome. So, no, but that is the truth. You were living that character's life, Samuel L. Jackson's life, where you were breakable. You were born with Osteogenesis Imperfecta. Now, I just know the title, but I don't know what it is. Please tell us what it is.
Yeah, it's so I guess the friendlier name for it is brittle bone disorder,
right?
Because osteogenesis is a bit of a mouthful to remember, and yeah, it's pretty much what it says on the tin. So even when I was born, I believe my parents told me that I already had fractures, as soon as I was born. So in the birthing process, I actually broke a bunch of bones in my transition into the world. So, and what it is, my bones don't develop the normal strength that perhaps your bones would. So how that used to manifest when I was a kid, and kids like to play, kids like to push each other, fall over, ride their bicycles, etc. And I was no different. But the difference was, if I fell off my bike, then that's a broken bone. Whereas, if my friend John fell off his bike, it might be just a little graze on the knee or whatever. So I had to be a little bit more careful, I suppose, and just a bit more cautious, because it could even happen unexpectedly. So it didn't need to be a massive trauma. There were times when I would sneeze, for example, and I'd crack some ribs as well. So pretty intense, but you get to a place where you learn to manage the pain and also learn how to look after yourself a bit better as you grow older. So I'm no longer as an adult pushing around in the playground anymore. You'd be glad to hear.
Well, that's good to hear. But I still think we need playground time as adults. It will make us a lot nicer in the world. So you are a culture specialist, but before you became a culture specialist, you worked in corporate England, as we'll call it. You worked in IT and in various consultancies. So let me ask, and just for everyone who's watching and listening, what is a culture specialist?
Yeah, sure. So, and that's evolved over time. So maybe I'll start off a bit from the early stages of that journey. And so when I studied at university, like you said, I was into IT. So I graduated with computer science.
Right.
And basically the IT geek, really enjoyed programming, software engineering. I used to be the guy who, all the aunties would come to if they wanted a website built or something. So that was me. And so then when it came to work, it was natural for me to apply for these technology roles.
Right.
And I've spent pretty much, I think, 8-9 years working for various companies in the corporate world. Started off in investment banking, not as a banker, but building the support IT systems for them. And then kind of moved around more into management consulting.
Okay.
So working with various clients, and if you're familiar with consulting, it was the whole, staying away Monday to Friday situation.
Yes.
At various client sites. all over the UK and Europe as well. So did that, and then I guess it got to a point in my life where, well, I had a bit of a, I called it the perfect storm happen.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a time when I started to kind of think in my career, is there more to life than just building IT systems? Was one thing I had going on in my mind. And then the other thing I had going on, or the other thing that happened at home was my mom got diagnosed with cancer. And it was kind
Right.
of like, okay, there's a lot going on. And then the third thing that happened, again, very short space of time, was I was in a relationship at the time, and that broke down as well. And I was
Okay.
like, oh my God, like, yeah, when it rains, it pours.
Mm.
And so, it's one of those situations where there was a lot of dark clouds, but I think the silver lining for me was, and especially because of my mom's situation, I had to take some time off work to be with my
Right.
family and to support. But what that gave me, and thankfully she's, recovered quite well now, it also gave me time to really reflect on what I wanted the next chapter, the next phase of my life to look like.
Okay.
And so one thing I'd kind of been playing around with at the time was with the public speaking. And around that time, someone encouraged me, a mentor encouraged me to apply for a TED Talk.
Okay.
So, like, okay, cool. I don't know if I'm ready, but I did it anyway. And to my horror, it was one of those when you apply for it and you hope you don't get it, but then because that is your mindset, you actually do get it. And and it's kind of like mixed emotions. And I saw the email saying, "Hey, Winston, congratulations!" And I was like, "Yeah," like yeah, wasn't sure how to react. And and then yeah, kind of to wrap this up, from the TED Talk, it got shared quite a bit by people in my network, people on my
Mm.
LinkedIn, etc. And then I had organizations reach out to me and say, "Hey, Winston, we saw your TED Talk on YouTube, or somebody shared your TED Talk on, you know, LinkedIn, etc. Would you mind coming to the office? Would you mind coming to our conference? Would you mind coming to our summer party and doing a inspirational talk?" And I was like,
Okay.
"Oh, okay, cool." And almost accidentally, this new career was born. And initially, I used to talk more around my personal story with the brittle bones and make it quite motivational, quite inspirational. But then over time, I've actually started to specialize in diversity and starting to specialize in, inclusion, working with CEOs and other leaders to create, particularly at this time, which I think is a very important topic, cultures that are more inclusive for
Right.
people of, my background, right? Because I worked, like I said, 8, 9 years in corporate, and I always felt like there was more that could be done in this space. So I've made it my mission to help these organizations on their journey.
Okay. And that's actually quite powerful, because when you look, you saw the gap, you saw where you could actually have that conversation, and going from your personal story over into looking at culture, looking at inclusion. And you talk about our unconscious bias, and I'll come back to
Mm-hmm.
that, because there's a lot I want to go through, but I want to look at your life. When you talk about how it was going through your childhood, coming up to teenage years, having to be on the sideline. How did
Mm-hmm.
your how did you manage those feelings as a young adult? Did you ever wish, why me? And how
Mm-hmm.
did you actually cope around, why do I have this condition?
Honestly, day to day, and some days I cope better than others. So I would love to say that, yeah, I was pretty evolved and took it all in my stride, etc. But that would be a lie. I think so. So I kind of, and one of the topics that I teach about is resilience. So I often give these talks at conferences where I talk about how to develop personal resilience,
Mm-hmm.
and which is a really easy topic to tie into my personal story. And I often get people saying to me, "Hey, Winston, you must be like the most resilient person on earth, right? Because of everything that you've been through, etc." But honestly, I don't think it's something that you just become. It's
Mm-hmm.
something that you have to work on every single day. And I almost put it on the spectrum where you have your resilient days and your kind of less resilient days, right? And so I guess a couple of examples of how that manifested. So when I was in my teenage years, you go through that phase, and I'm sure you remember because you're a young lady. That phase of wanting to be the most popular in the school, or that phase of everyone's pairing up. You're 12, 13, everyone's starting to get into their boyfriend girlfriend situations, etc. And of course, I wanted to be involved in that
Mm-hmm.
because you know despite looking different, under the hood, I'm just exactly the same as any other human, any other teenager. And
Yes.
so there were times when I was just like super frustrated in the sense of, hey, why do, for example, why do the girls not see Winston? Why do they have to judge me for my appearance or my situation, for
Mm-hmm.
example, right? So there were those kind of frustrations, and then also in society as well, because I look pretty different to most rooms I enter. So I don't know if this is going to be on video, but for those who are listening, I'm about probably 3.5 feet tall. Um, I'm in a wheelchair, and so I look unique to the maybe average 30-year-old black male you might see on the street, right?
Right.
And so it's always been, and this has developed over time. I think I made it my responsibility to teach or to almost educate people on how to be around me, because people respond differently. You have the people who, when they meet me for the first time, they're like, "Oh, okay, this is different. Should I shake his hand? Should I say hello? Should I come down to his level?" And so what I try to do is just help. I'll probably be the one to reach out. If we were meeting face to face, Lily, and I'd just go for the hug or go for the handshake, just to put you out of your misery. Because I do see situations where, and especially in this politically correct world that we live in, people don't want
Exactly.
to
You
offend.
don't know.
Yeah, and people don't want to ask either because they think, oh, am I allowed to? So I just make it my thing to, hey, you know what? I'm just gonna lead on this. So that's helped me a lot as well.
And I think that will be great. And judging from backgrounds, when we know how individuals, especially having to deal with disability and having to deal with that, then you have some people, because we're having to learn this. And I know that family and family members and well-meaning individuals, I know I have friends with different abilities, and I know how what we call the aunties will see them, and the first thing they want to do is pray or give pity. And so how did you navigate those elements as an
Mm.
individual to actually deal with those well-meaning individuals in our family, which they didn't know how to deal with it other than in the way that they were?
I think a lot better nowadays than I used to. So I was even having a conversation with my partner actually yesterday around, because I remember this one story which I think relates to what you're saying. We went for a meal as a family to, I think it was just a pub. So we just went for a Sunday roast one
Okay.
time. And, it's me and my family, big group, about 6, 7, 8 of us, whatever. And, as we sort of went to take our seats, there was this one particular gentleman who just would not stop staring at me. Like he, and, it's not even one of those where you kind of look, but you pretend you're not looking. Like he'll
Mm-hmm.
just literally like eyeballing me the whole time. And it's a bit awkward actually, because yeah, he's not even hiding it. He's just there. And
Just
I
like looking
remember,
at you.
yeah, 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 yeah. And I remember we even took our seats, and because we were kind of behind him, he turned his chair a little bit so that he could actually keep looking at me as he was having his drink.
That's a
And
bit weird.
it was borderline freaky. And so I remember this one. So this is an example of how not to handle it, maybe. So I remember like getting fed up at some point,
Mm-hmm.
and I literally like wheeled myself over to him and just parked my chair next to him, and I said, I just came over so I could give you a closer look, because it seems like that's something you're trying to look at. So don't do that. That's a do not do example. And then I guess on the flip side, like you talk about with the aunties and stuff, and obviously African descent, we've got relatives in different parts of the world. A lot of my relatives are in Kenya,
Right.
actually. And so I know when we go, for example, to some of the villages, it's like, oh my God. And sometimes there's just a shock of, wow, is so different, and then other times it's, oh my God, we need to pray, and that kind of thing. I think the way I've learned to deal with that is, first of all, not to be upset,
Yeah.
is to see the heart of where they're coming from, because I think there was a time when I'd kind of get frustrated and throw my toys at the pram. But these people generally mean well. It's just that, they just don't know how else to respond, because especially in certain African cultures, it's, oh my God, something bad. The default thing is to pray, which, I accept as well because I am a believer, right? But I think what's helped me with that is, first of all, to see the heart behind it, and then secondly, just to, again, educate them, like I was saying earlier, just to talk to them, show them that actually Winston is Winston, and, the wheelchair just happens to be, a tool that I use to get from A to B. But, other than that, I'm just a normal human being with the same normal feelings that you're having right now.
Cool. And I am not even sure how that person reacted when you willed yourself next to him and was like, all right, so have a closer look. I'm not sure how that person reacted, and I'm sure that it took all of your calm to just actually stay calm as you went over there. Like, is that what?
It was actually I think I potentially made it more awkward after doing that, because he was kind of like, yeah, I don't even think he said a word. He was speechless, because for sure he was, that wasn't on his things to expect from this scenario. So, and then I remember my sister, might be my sister, my cousin coming over and saying, okay, enough, think you made your point, let's go back to the table and and carry on with our Sunday roast. But I definitely don't recommend that approach.
Well, at least, but it was effective and it's memorable. He won't forget it.
Yeah, I think next time he sees a little guy in a wheelchair, it will trigger something for him.
He will act accordingly.
We can only
So
hope. We can only hope.
exactly, we can only hope. So you've spoken about your family, and you speak in your bio about how your family had come to be a support system for you and
Mm-hmm.
made you more determined to overcome your obstacles.
Mm-hmm.
And how did your parents deal with it? How did your siblings support? How was that structure for you?
Mm. Yeah, pretty. I think I'm pretty lucky. Like, one of the things I say is, I believe I was born into the right family, right? So the family that was best equipped
Right.
to deal with a Winston shaped baby, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I say that because from the off, and again, because of my African background, I know there would have been pressure on my parents to perhaps, not even keep me, for example, or put me in a care home, because, like you said, the condition is extremely rare.
Mm-hmm.
I believe it's 1 in 20,000 people have it at birth, so
Wow.
that's pretty rare. But out of those people that have it at birth, an even smaller percentage make it to age 5, because if you think about it, if falling off a chair can result in multiple broken bones, that could potentially be fatal for an infant, right?
Yes.
And so there's a pretty, I don't have the number, but the infant mortality rate for this condition is crazy. So even to reach age 5, even to be here like in my 30s today, that's already a miracle in itself, right? And so with my parents, I think one of the really cool things that they've always done is well, cool but frustrating at the time, was I never got any special treatment.
Okay.
So, there's three of us, three kids, well, grown-ups now, and I'm the eldest, and my two younger sisters, perfectly able-bodied. And I think there was a part of me when I was younger that used to think, yeah, but I'm this special child. Come on, look, got all these special needs, people. Give me special treatment. Can I stay up a bit later, or can I miss school today? And that kind of thinking when I was young. And
Mm-hmm.
my parents were pretty firm. All the rules were applied the same way. Discipline was applied the same way. I'd get grounded. I'd get my stuff taken away, just like anyone else when I misbehaved. And
Right.
so that that has always put me in the mindset of, you know what, I don't step out into the world expecting any special treatment for Winston. I'm just out there to earn it like everyone else, to earn my degree, to earn my career as a speaker. You know, for me, I know I still have to put in 100% because nothing's going to get given to me.
Okay.
And yeah, and I think another example of that was like with my school journey, for example. So I think at that point was potentially the one time my parents considered whether to send me to a regular mainstream school or to put me in a specialized school.
Right.
Because again, the school environment is crazy. You know, when especially in primary school, the risk of me getting injured was pretty high because I'm not always gonna be on the sidelines. At some point, I'm gonna get involved in something that I shouldn't be, right? And so, but they made the tough call to just kind of let me go and be in the jungle with all the other kids. And I honestly think that's one of the biggest gifts they gave me
Right.
because I mean, yeah, there were situations, and I think there were a couple of injuries, especially in primary school. Just silly stuff me doing that I shouldn't have been doing probably. But I think what again that gave me was that resilience of I'm always going to find ways, creative ways of adapting to my environment, right? So
And that's powerful.
yeah, you can imagine a situation like PE where everyone's playing football, like literally like the arch enemy of Winston, like football, like a sport where you play with your feet and you have to run. And so me trying to figure out a way of getting involved in that. And I think in the end, what I started doing was I decided, okay, I can't kick a ball, but I can referee the game, right?
Ah, true.
Exactly. So I was like, PE teacher, give me that whistle. I'm gonna get involved as the referee. And so like stuff like that, which sounds pretty trivial, but I think it builds up this growth mindset where
Mhm.
you find yourself in a new environment and you're like, okay, I might not be able to do it, path A, but what does path B and path C look like?
Sure. And that's actually a unique way of looking at it, because you're like, there's no way you're running to kick at this ball, so you just stay on the side, you be the referee, and you don't have to run anywhere. You can see everything.
Yeah, and you're part of the game still. You know,
Exactly.
the game can't be played without a ref.
Exactly. You're an important part of the game. So you talk about biases, you talk about how we need to look at the idea of cultural inclusion and how
Mm,
cultural and diversity, and right now with everything unfolding, that is critical. But most of the time we forget that we have our own biases. So how do we check our biases, especially in this time that we are in?
mm. Yeah, I love that question. And especially the fact that we all have our biases because just thinking about what's going on right now with I guess you could call it the racial injustice conversations
Yes.
that are happening. It's it's a bit of a temptation to think that I'm black, you're black, that as black people perhaps we don't have these biases ourselves. These biases are only directed towards us. But I think every human being has their biases.
Oh yeah.
I was speaking at a conference yesterday, and I shared this little example of a friend of mine. So this friend, she has a telephone interview,
Okay.
and so you know, I think the interview was, I can't remember the time, but let's say it was at 2 o'clock. And so 2 o'clock, she's ready, phone rings, and picks up the interview. And the interviewer was like, "Hello, could I speak to Joanne? She's got an interview at 2." And she responds, "Hi, it's Joanne speaking." And this kind of goes back and forth because he says, "Sorry, can I speak to Joanne?" It's like, "Joanne speaking." And
Mhm.
actually, what was happening was because my friend Joanne happens to be transgender, she's got a slightly deeper voice than you'd expect of someone called Joanne, right?
Right.
And so it took the recruiter a long time to realize, oh my God, like this is Joanne, but she's just a slightly different Joanne than what I pictured,
Yes.
right? And these situations happen all the time. Like I said, with me as well, there'll be times when I meet people and I could be with a friend and they'll address the friend,
Mm.
when they're actually saying something with regards to me, right? Because
Yes.
they jump to an assumption of, oh, he's in a wheelchair, legs don't work. probably brain doesn't work either. I guess is the rationale there.
I
So
think so.
exactly. I mean, the two organs could be farther away from each other, but anyway. So we all have this, and to
Yeah.
be honest, like I'll even call myself out because in my time working at corporate, there was a time when a visually impaired colleague joined the team, right?
Hmm.
And he actually sat pretty close to me. But again, I found myself now I was on the other side because I found myself kind of in this situation. His name was Paul, and kind of thinking, oh my God, like I want to ask Paul a question or I want to tell him something. Should I just go up to him and speak? Should I tap him on the shoulder so he knows that, he's got some warning, etc. So those are just different situations where our unconscious biases can come into play.
Hmm.
But honestly, like the thing that helps the most, and it's going to sound really simple and really boring, is that education piece. Is
Yeah.
people being prepared to have even these conversations that we're having right now. It might trigger an example for someone listening to this is like, oh my God, there was that other time when I interviewed this type of person and I had this thought. And so the more we talk about these things, the more people build up an awareness because it's very easy to see the world according to your lens. In my world, I figure, if you invite me to your house, you should know that there should be a ramp so that I can get into your house, right? Like
Exactly.
that should be a no-brainer. But actually, it might not be a no-brainer for you because you don't need a ramp to get into your house. Your legs are perfectly capable of using stairs. So the more we have these types of conversation and bring things to light, I think that helps a lot. And then maybe the other little bit to add is also being aware on intersectionalities and how they play out within unconscious bias.
Yeah.
So with the example with Joanne that I stated earlier, so she's a transgender female, and so the challenge that she had with her voice match was a challenge that is very specific to someone belonging to that intersection,
Yeah.
right? And again, with my situation, being in a wheelchair or being ethnic minority and in a wheelchair, again, that could have a certain implication with me applying for a job, for example,
Of
right?
course.
At
Yeah.
a big corporate organization. And so it's bringing awareness to where those intersections can be problematic, like Joanne's example, or where they could also accrue privilege, because again, there are types of intersections that are, to be fair, they're good to have, right? So if you're, a Caucasian man with a Oxbridge education and you're applying for a job at Goldman Sachs, then that that helps. That's privilege. That helps.
Exactly.
So it's highlighting where it could be a problem and where it could be a privilege. And it's not to knock anyone who's got privilege, but it's saying how can we leverage that to help everyone else, have a successful career or whatever.
And that's true, because when we hear the word privilege right now, there is a connotation attached to it. We all have a certain privilege. And I think there's also a discussion around that needs to be had, because I recognize my privilege as a woman
Mm-hmm.
and what that accords me in certain spaces. So in certain spaces, I know that even though I am a Black woman, and yes, the weight of that against looking at how what racism and lack of inclusion can be a detrimental to me, I'm still in some cases more privileged than a Black man, because I'm also not seen as much as a threat. So we all have a certain level of privilege and we all have a certain level of bias. And I think
Mm-hmm.
being willing to discuss that and being willing to look at it and actually inspect that for ourselves is actually needed. And I think it's a conversation that needs to be discussed. And I think another thing that we need to understand is when people start using words like social capital, let's get clear. What is social capital and why is it important?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so social capital is one of the angles that I cover in my in my diversity and inclusion workshops. And for me, again, it ties in really well with this conversation on privilege
Yeah.
versus problem if you belong to certain groups. And so, like I touched on previously, so my background is African. I actually was born in Africa and I moved to the UK when I was about 10, 11, something
Okay.
like that. And so, and so I almost imagine it, I almost, in my mind, I feel like I've lived two completely different lives because I remember my life age 0 to 10 and then my life from then until now. And, completely different. So, and I was speaking on another show yesterday where we're talking about, you know, racism and the Black Lives Matter movement. And I was saying, actually, I didn't really know racism when I was younger because when I was growing up in Africa, everyone was black, right?
Yes.
So it just wasn't a topic like, you know, hey black boy, hey black, we're all black. So like it just never came up. And it was only when I moved to UK, not that I experienced massive racism, but I just became aware of my blackness, you
Yeah.
know. And so when it comes to social capital specifically, so after I finished school, finished my university, and and now I was in a position where I was, applying for these really big corporates and these really big companies. I was fortunate that my first job was actually basically a dream job for a 21-year-old, investment banking, working in
Nice.
tech, cutting edge technology, probably getting paid way too much for a 21-year-old. And so literally, to be honest, I thought I'd made it in life at the time. And but what I realized was after being in the company a little
Mm-hmm.
while, I was enjoying the work, but there was still a feeling of disconnect, which I
Right.
couldn't really put my finger on. And it almost felt embarrassing to talk about because, to my friends were like, oh my God, you work for this amazing bank and got all these benefits, this, that, the other. Like I was embarrassed to say, yeah, but actually I'm not, there's something not right about it. Like it just felt like a
Mm.
embarrassing topic to bring up. And what I started to realize was, first of all, this feeling stayed with me most of my corporate career.
Right.
And and then it was only when I did that transition to, becoming more of a trainer, more of a speaker, and learning a bit more about inclusion and diversity that I then finally figured out what that disconnect was. And that disconnect was a disconnect between me and the culture of these big corporates,
Right.
right? And, you know, with social capital, I remember like examples when I first started my career. In that first couple of weeks, my friends, because we were a cohort of graduates,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of them, like day one, day two, they were like networking like crazy, right? They were they were networking with people in other teams, other divisions. They were arranging coffees, they were getting mentors. And I was just there like a lost sheep, like, yeah, but when am I gonna do all my work? Right? So I just didn't see the value of it. And then, likewise, when it came to career conversations and promotions and stuff, it always came up that, hey, Winston, like you do a really good job, but you don't shout about it enough. Like
Mm.
you don't market yourself enough. But which I at the time found a really unfair criticism because you're saying I've done a good job. So how can you how can you hold me back based on not shouting about the thing that I've done? Right? It didn't make sense to me.
Well.
Exactly. Exactly. But it was a real thing. I just didn't have a concept of it. So one of the ways I try to use this social capital, which is what I believe I was missing back then, because social capital is just simply the power of leveraging relationships, right?
Mm.
So those mentorships, those coffees that you have with the other team or the other team member, etc. Because when they move company, they may remember you, or you might be in a position where you want to switch jobs, and it's like, oh yeah, you've already got that connection, so it's a lot easier to make the move, right?
Yes.
And so I work with the main way that I do this, I work with an organization, a charity called Migrant Leaders,
Okay.
and where we working with 16 to 18-year-olds from socio-economic deprived backgrounds. And so we support them with basically building social capital at the major organizations. We have partners at big corporations, Microsoft, Ernest and Young, and the major FTSE 100 names that you can think of.
Mm-hmm.
And these are sponsors who've agreed to A, be mentors, and B, even allow these young people to come in and get a taster of what it would be to spend a day at, Ernest and Young, spend a couple of weeks at Microsoft, and just get that feeling and give them a head start so that when they do graduate, they'll have a better starting point than what I did. Because like I said, I came from a immigrant background. None of my relatives worked at, big corporate companies. So I didn't have that older brother or that dad to tell me, oh, by the way, week one, you need to be out there networking or getting mentorship. So I'm trying to be that person for these young people through migrant leaders.
That's actually quite powerful. And you touch on something about what it's like being a first and only, especially if you're a first and only in your family, to actually be in certain scenarios, if you're a first and only, and if you are a first and only in that arena. But there's another element that we don't talk about, and this I think is from the diverse community, let's call it the BME community. We haven't been taught the value of that social capital, because we're taught, go to school, get your degree, do your work. Don't be talking to John. Don't be talking to anybody. Do you put your head down and do your work? So we're never taught the power of that social capital. That, yeah, I know there's Michael. Michael doesn't look like he does anything all day other than talk to people and drink coffee. But Michael is always getting promoted. And you're like, I'm going to push Michael down the stairs one of these days.
That was literally me, yeah. Sorry, Michael.
Accidents happen, Michael. And we're not promoting violence against Michaels out here. This is not what we're doing. But what we're saying is, we didn't know. And so there's that power of actually the education of why this piece is important and why this skill needs to be taught in schools, why the work that you're doing with migrant leaders is absolutely crucial for these young people coming up, so that they understand it intrinsically. Because the guys who go to Oxford are educated in the way of, yes, my daddy runs this Fortune 500 company. He's daddy and the other daddy are talking together and putting their kids to talk together. So they know by the time they get oh yeah, my dad goes golfing with your dad. And that's how it works for them.
Precisely.
And so we need to learn that. We need to learn the power of using that network. But it's also, I think, another piece is, and I'm sure that you will talk about this a bit more, that it's not enough to have mentors. We need people who are willing to be sponsors. We need people who are willing to open those doors and say, yes, come in and we'll speak on your behalf. Because mentorship is one level, but I think we also need that piece of having sponsors.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's about allies, isn't it? And,
Yes.
and allies is probably a more understood word today than it was 3 weeks ago with the whole Black Lives Matter situation. So I don't even feel like I need to define it too much. But allies it's important on two levels. So first of all, going back to the privilege conversation, where you have privilege, then you have so much power to be an ally for somebody who has less privilege.
Yes.
Right. So that's one level, and on that level, anybody can participate. As long as you have privilege, which we all do, depending on the context, then you also have you have a responsibility to be an ally for someone with less privilege, right? Is how I see it.
Yeah.
And then on maybe the second level is, I believe that responsibility is even greater for leaders, quote unquote. And when I say leaders, I'm not talking about job titles specifically. I'm talking, of course, that helps if you're a CEO of a company and you can be an ally and bring in or participate even in an organization like Migrant Leaders. Then you're helping a lot of people through your privilege, right? Or setting up things within your own company in your own way, right? But even people with platforms, like even you, Lillian, you've got this platform where you have lots of listeners. I've got my platforms as well. I believe because we have this elevated status through our platforms, then again we have a high responsibility to be allies to those that perhaps haven't got the privilege that we have.
Yeah.
And so and so for me that is key. And then I've often had people say to me, yeah, but what about, I've only got a platform of X number of people. I'm not in the millions, or, I'm not even on tens of thousands, etc. Right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you use your influence, whether it impacts 10 people or 100 people, that's 10 people that hadn't received your help and your support yesterday, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So,
And and the we'll talk about impact a bit more, but
mm,
the idea is, if we impact one person and that one person impacts two people and those two people impact five people, it creates this chain reaction of change. So I think there's this idea, there's people underestimate just how much impact that they can
hmm
make in themselves wherever they are in the world today.
yeah, it's exponential, and we tend to look at things linear,
Mm-hmm.
whereas we just see it as, a straight line. But actually, you impact one person, you don't know what kind of platform they have. They could have,
Exactly.
you know 1,000 or 5,000 underneath them. So, it's never a lost cause whenever you're able to help someone positively.
Of course. And then, we are talking about impact because, you did an interview recently with the Inspired Stewardship podcast where you were talking about the impact in the world and the top ways. So let's look at the top ways that one can impact
hmm
another individual in
hmm
in sense of impact in the world that we live in. What are the top ways that we can say, I want to make an impact, but I don't know how?
mm Yeah, and actually, I think this has been a something that's been present to me recently, and especially with, and I know I keep bringing it up with what's been going on recently in the last couple of weeks. And actually, one thing which I felt a little bit uncomfortable with when it comes to impact is I feel like in some pockets there's been a little bit of a shaming mentality. So, and I'll describe. So, with the Black Lives Matter situation, for example, there's been people have responded to this, quite well, generally
Mm-hmm.
speaking. But there's also been organizations and individuals who perhaps they didn't respond straight away, right? Or they took their time or whatever. They went
Mm-hmm.
through their process. And so I think the little thing that I was personally uncomfortable with was for those that didn't respond instantly, like there were people who kind of jumped on them and said, hey, like, you're complicit, you're racist, this, that, the other, because you didn't put out a statement, at 12:01 a.m. saying that you're anti-racist,
Mm.
right? And, I can kind of see where that comes from, but I think we also have to allow grace for people and companies to process things in their own way, right? I know myself, I didn't really, after seeing the video that went viral, I think I was traumatized, to be honest, and I didn't even watch it till the end. And it took me a few days, good 4 or 5 days, to collect my thoughts and decide how I wanted to address this with my platforms. I knew I had the responsibility to share something, but I just wasn't ready straight away. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think when it comes to impact, it's an important element of that is to allow it to be in the shape of the person that's giving it, right? We don't all have to have the impact in the same way.
Yeah.
And so and so I've had people saying, okay, yeah, so I want to help, for example, and this could be about the current situation or any other social injustice or cause or thing that you care about, right? And it's like, so how can I help? How can I make a difference? I'm only one person, right? So one for sure is what we talked about, just leverage whatever platform you have, to help somebody,
Yeah.
even if it's, something like migrant leaders, whatever. And we're not the only organization that do this. There's thousands, I'm sure. So do your research, find the one that ties in with your values,
Mm-hmm.
and see if you can support in that way. And then another one is, other than helping people who are less privileged than you, having those conversations at home, I think, is really important and something that is accessible to most people,
Yeah.
right? So particularly thinking about injustice at the moment. And, you know, I actually went to school in West London, which was a predominantly Asian school. And I was telling the story recently about, growing up, it was pretty normal for my Asian friends to refer to me as Kala, which in Punjabi means the black one, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but it wasn't even. I never felt offended by it. I'm pretty sure they did not mean any offense by it,
Mm-hmm.
but it was just kind of like, oh yeah, that's how their grandparents or their aunties and uncles refer to black people, and now we have a black friend, so it just continued, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so with having those conversations at home, it's, now that we're becoming more aware about what's okay, what's not okay, then, it's almost a twofold responsibility. So first of all, it's my responsibility to say, hey, by the way, can't call me the black one anymore. That's not
Yeah.
cool.
No.
Yeah, and then for them to, if this is what they're hearing at home or in their circles, to then educate that grandma or that auntie or that uncle who's been using that type of language, because it probably comes from a pure place, but they just don't know what's okay and what's not okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that piece also helps, and that is a really accessible piece where you don't need a platform, you don't need to be a CEO of a company to make that impact straight in your home environment.
Okay. And yeah, I agree. The conversations that need to be had, I agree with everything you said. And the whole thing around the Black Lives Matter, I think you said it best, that we need to be grace, give people the grace that they need to respond. Not everybody can respond instantaneously. And yes, some companies have had historic patterns. And if they're willing to change, give them that grace
Mm-hmm.
to actually put forward the work. It's, and I think we should not shut down the allies that are willing to putting their hand up and wanting to help. And I think that's crucial in this time, in this conversation. So that's just my thoughts on that.
Mm-hmm.
So we know that your key area of conversation is resilience and building that resilience, and you have a key point on extreme ownership. What is extreme ownership and how do we practice it?
Yeah, yeah, one of my favorite topics. So extreme ownership, yeah, so maybe the best way to explain it is, yeah, if I use an analogy which I've used before, which imagine we were neighbors, Lillian,
Mm-hmm.
living on the same street. I'm sure you'd make a great neighbor. And
I'm not bad. I'm good.
yeah, sure. And yeah, so we're living on this street. We're next door neighbors. And so I'm going to do a comparison here between regular ownership and extreme ownership. So regular ownership would be to say it is your responsibility to keep
Mm-hmm.
your section of the street clean and tidy. So,
Yes.
look after your own patch, so to speak. And
Right.
same for me, right? Whereas extreme ownership would be to say it is still your responsibility to ensure that the entire street remains clean and tidy.
Right.
And so you can already see this means that, extreme ownership upholds you to step up in those situations where others can't or
Mm-hmm.
won't, right? So if I decide to leave like trash all over the street, etc., and make a huge mess, and you come home and you're like, oh my God, Winston's done it again. Like you don't complain, you just sort it out, right?
Right.
And, and at this point you might be thinking, oh, this sounds like I'm getting shortchanged here.
Pretty much,
But
yes. I'm calling the housing association and going like, somebody needs to talk to Winston because I'm not cleaning up his garden. And yeah, no, it's not happening.
Exactly. And the power of extreme ownership is what it does for you. Taking that ownership mentality is, I believe, it actually puts you in control, right?
Right.
And obviously the street example is fictional, and I would be calling the housing association as well and using that as the means of sorting that out.
Yes.
But what it does when you take responsibility, and responsibility, could be to make that call.
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessarily to always go and pick up trash after somebody, right? But when
Yeah.
you take responsibility, it puts you in control of the situation rather than the opposite mindset, which would be to just kind of leave it and say, well, if he doesn't care enough about, you know, living on a tidy street, then I'm just going to leave it, you know,
Hmm.
because then what happens there is everyone suffers. You suffer, they suffer, like the entire neighborhood suffers, right?
Yes.
And so kind of bringing it back to myself, like the way the way I apply this in my own, I guess, day-to-day life is I'll even take extreme ownership of being disabled,
Okay.
right? And I've said that to people and they're like, oh my God, how? But like,
Exactly. That's the next question was about to come was how do you take extreme ownership of
you
being
didn't choose
disabled?
this. Yeah. And for me, what that means is, again, I could take regular ownership where I'd be like, well, hey, I'm disabled and, I'm in a wheelchair. Probably society doesn't expect people like me to succeed anyway. So I'm not going to try. I'm just not going to even think about employment. I'll just sit at home, get help from the government, etc. Because that's the regular path. That is what is expected of
Right.
people in my situation, right? Whereas extreme ownership, remember, upholds you to a higher level. So it's like, you know, I need to ask myself, how can I find a way to win despite whatever cards I've been dealt? So with my disability, it's like, yep, I could take the easy route and no one would blame me.
Mm-hmm.
But how can I push myself further? How can I, again, going back to that school situation, how can I get involved in this football game? How can I do something about my career? How can I progress, navigate a corporate career despite having no connections in corporate England, so to speak?
Yeah.
So it always puts you in that, I guess, growth mindset way of thinking where you're forever extending and stretching yourself out of your comfort zone. And that's why I think it's so powerful because it doesn't give you permission to rest on your laurels. If there's anything that needs tidying up, if there's any trash to pick up, so to speak, then
Mm-hmm.
there's never a day off where you're allowed to just let that trash lie on the ground, even when it's not your fault.
Right. Okay. I actually understand. And so if you go into personal development and you look at things
Mm-hmm,
like Oponopono, where they talk about
mm-hmm,
total responsibility of
mm-hmm.
situations, a
Exactly.
zero blaming situation where you go, this are the cards that I've been dealt. These are my cards. They're not the greatest, but I'm still going to play the hand that I have.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually quite powerful when you think about it that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for me, if you're not in extreme ownership, then potentially you're just putting yourself in a victim mindset, right? Because a yeah, and I think this is why the control piece is so important. And if someone in extreme ownership is in control of their destiny, they might not get to where they want to get to, but at least they have some control. But
Yes.
whereas when you're in a victim mindset, then life is just happening to you. It's just all happening to you. So you're just a spectator and you hope that whatever happens will benefit you, or otherwise you're just basically screwed and just kind of rolling the dice here. So don't roll the dice, take ownership, extreme
Cool.
ownership.
I like this. I like this, and I may have to borrow that term, extreme ownership, because
Yeah, do it.
it's a powerful term. And you're also the co-founder of Talk Less, Do More Mastermind Group.
Mhm.
What sparked the creation?
Yeah, so Talk Let's Do More Mastermind is a, well, first of all, my co-partner and I, who actually she's also my life partner, so let me give her both titles. So we came up with the idea last year of creating a mastermind group, and I'm sure many of your listeners will be familiar with the concept of a mastermind.
Yes.
But I think we wanted to have a group that, because we both do a lot of work in the diversity and inclusion space, a group that allowed people who wouldn't be traditionally looking at getting into a mastermind or traditionally looking at personal development to give them a space that felt more accessible to them, right? And so I'm thinking people from, certain backgrounds culturally or socioeconomically who
Mm-hmm.
are interested in entrepreneurship, but again, perhaps they haven't got the social capital, they haven't got, the celebrity friends who can kind of just hook them up with, venture capital funding, for example, right?
Or daddy who knows somebody who he goes with.
Yeah, exactly. And so we tend to attract people, actually, it's quite a range in age. I was going to say sort of early 20s to mid 30s, but we've got people now even older than that. And I think the general consensus is that it's mostly people who are in the startup phase of their business. So between sort of 0 to 3 years in
Okay.
business. And generally, we're very particular because it's by application only. We're looking for people whose business is also about social change or having a social impact, so that when they do get set up and when they do start seeing success, then we want their business or their venture to be another vehicle for them to bring other people in from our community. So, and we talk, let's do more. I think my partner and I, when we were brainstorming names, we realized that there's a lot of personal development jargon out there and people being very motivational and saying, hey, you can do it, or talking about how to become a 7-figure coach in 2 weeks and that kind of thing. And so we wanted to move away from that and focus more on the practicalities. So our workshops are, we often have people coming in and saying, hey, I don't even know how to register a business. So we'll literally like share a screen, go on the company house website, register it there and then. That does not need to be a 90-minute workshop. It's a 5-minute job if we share a screen and do it together. So it's very much emphasis on practicalities. We also bring in guest speakers because we realize that, I'm not an expert on every topic in the world. Sometimes people want to learn about different things like property, trading, and that kind of thing. So we'll just book a speaker to share their expertise and again, give access to this group who perhaps wouldn't have had the connection to those types of people. So that's really what Talk Let's Do More is about. And yeah, super happy to discuss with anyone if they might be open to exploring.
Okay, so what you do, please, let us know how we can find out more about Talk Less, Do More. Send us the links. We'll put it on our page so that people can have access to it. And we have come to that portion of the show where it's time for the So Loud moment of the week. So Winston, what is your So Loud moment?
Yeah, I think I'm going to shout out a couple of people if that's all right. And
by all means.
Yeah, so, and these are actually, good thing we ended with Talk Let's Do More. These are people who just graduated from the last cohort of Talk Let's Do More that finished in March. So the first person I'm going to shout out is a incredible guy called Ikenna Onyebuchi. And he joined Talk Let's Do More in March. And pretty much from zero, he's created a platform called BAME Nation. And what this platform is he provides advice and support and I guess using his privilege and his social capital to aspiring lawyers. So he helps lawyers, particularly graduate lawyers who are looking to enter the legal career. And he provides them with strategy, with ideas, with connections as to how to not just enter but navigate, a top flight legal career here in the UK or abroad. So that's the first guy. Yeah, it's pretty cool. And he's helped a lot of people and he's a young guy himself, or he graduated a couple of years ago himself. Wow. And the second person I'm going to shout out is, again, another lady from Talk Let's Do More. She's a graduate and her name is Brumbi Vache, and she runs a events company. And again, a really young lady in her early 20s, and she's done some incredible events, massive weddings, massive corporate events. And I think I want to shout out these two young people because for the progress that they've made, crazy progress in the last 3 months, and also the fact that they've been so willing to help others through their ventures. So both Ikenna and Rumbi I see them as future leaders. And so hopefully this will give them some of the recognition which I think they deserve.
Awesome. So again, send us their links, send us a bit more details about
Yeah,
them, and
will
we'll
do.
put them on the page but once your show is up. And so just a couple more questions.
Yeah.
Let's, and one of the things is in this time, there's a lot going on. There's a corona, there's the racial upheaval, there's so much. And there is this constant drive for us to be productive at this time. So my question is, how are you taking care of yourself in terms of self-care practices at this time?
Mm. Yeah, great question. And I think this is something that I struggled with a little bit at the beginning of Corona, especially
Mm-hmm.
because I think, like most people, business was impacted. So it was kind of that, chasing around, trying to figure out what's going to stay on the books, what's going to have to be cancelled, etc. And then I think I found myself in a situation where I wasn't really applying a routine because I think we all have our routine that we used to have in the normal world. And then we
Yes.
have like our Corona routine. And because I didn't have a Corona routine on day one, I just found myself, staying up later than usual
Hmm.
because I guess in my mind I was thinking, well, I'm not really going anywhere tomorrow. So, we're in lockdown. So I'm just going to wake up when I wake up. But actually, what I realized was I was sleeping longer, but not really resting
Hmm.
because that disconnection with my routine actually made me more tired and actually less productive. And so, what really helped me, I guess, a couple of practical things was first of all, just setting an alarm in the morning, even when you are going to be at home,
Mm-hmm.
the whole day. Like, it's sticking to that regular routine of I wake up at a certain time, I have my food, my lunch, my dinner at a certain time as well. And I
Mm-hmm.
actually learned that your immune system is heightened by routine, right? So when you maintain a routine, it actually helps your immune system because
Okay.
when you're out of sync with your routine, then your body thinks that there's something wrong, right?
Ah.
Yes, your body thinks that there's something wrong, and that actually compromises your whole immune system, right?
Okay.
So there is actual health benefits to it as well. And then the other couple of things that I did was I realized I was losing connection with people, so I wasn't being because I guess pre-corona you'd always like somehow manage to meet someone for a coffee in town, etc. But during corona, if you don't call people, then you're pretty much you're seeing whoever you live with, and that's it,
Yeah.
right? And so being intentional about reaching out to people, and not just because you need someone to talk to, but actually reaching out from a place of I just want to check on you, see how you are, check in, and doing the same also with business clients has been really cool
Mm-hmm.
because just setting up those virtual coffees has allowed me to get to know people in a more personal way than we
Mm-hmm.
normally would. Whereas, pre-corona is kind of like, let's meet for half an hour and, bring your proposal. It's very formal, right? But now you can just have a catch up and a virtual coffee and just get to know somebody. So that's really helped me as well. And maybe the last thing, which I was doing more earlier, but I haven't done recently, is don't be afraid to have a nap during the day. Like literally, if you feel like you need a nap, honestly, 20-minute power naps, best thing ever invented. But they weren't invented; they were always there, but no one seems to use them as much as they ought to. So yeah, just kind of giving yourself that permission if you are feeling lethargic, tired during the day, 20-minute energizer. So
I
those
must be
things
the
really help me.
only I must be the only person in the world that doesn't nap because I wake up from a nap and it's like 4 years later you're like, wait, what happened? I am not a napper.
That's why it should only be 20 minutes. Any longer than 20 minutes, you're sleeping. That's
Yes.
not an nap, Lillian.
I wake up and it feels like a whole lifetime has passed. And, you wake up and you have this groggy face. It's like, no, so
Yeah.
I don't nap.
Yeah, beyond 20 minutes is counterproductive. You literally have to set your alarm for 20 minutes.
All right. Winston, it's been a real pleasure having you on the show. I can't thank you enough for spending time with me today. I have just one last question. Who would you want to play you in the movie about your life? John Boyega or, we just asking for friends.
So many options. I mean, you already compared me to Samuel L. Jackson at the start,
No,
but
it's yeah.
yeah, I feel like I'm more of a. If Denzel is listening, then please, you have my blessing. You have my full permission to play Winston Ben Clements in the next movie. I particularly like an old movie of his called Man on Fire, so I could kind of
Mm.
see Winston being, that Man on Fire kind of character. So Denzel, you've got the part, man.
Okay,
Congratulations.
so we'll pass this to his people and have his people call your people.
Fantastic. Thank you for the hookup, Lillian.
No problem, no problem. You're welcome. So once again, thank you so much. And, we're looking forward to hearing more about your projects. Please share all your links with us. And actually, before you go, just let people know how they can find you on the socials.
Yeah, sure. So for me, it's just my website, which is winstonclements.com. So on that website, it's got all my social media links. So feel free to connect on any that apply. And then with the mastermind that I talked about earlier, it's just talklessdomore.co.uk.
Right.
And check it out, watch the video, see what you think.
All right, awesome. And you're also on Instagram on Talk Less Do More as well. And also Migrant Leaders. How can we find Migrant Leaders?
Oh yeah, Migrant Leaders is on migrantleaders.co.uk.
Okay.
And I'll also share the link so we can post them in.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much. So guys, it's a wrap. You know what to do. If you liked today's episode, give us a subscribe, go to iTunes, give us a recommendation. You know what to do. You know where to find us. Reach out to us on social. Let us know what you loved about this episode and drop us a message. So guys, same time next week, we'll be there. Bye.